All right. Try something different here. Now you're getting the regular microphone from the room too. But maybe I can fix that. But here's the other problem. Where's your chat? I don't know if you're saying any words. Show. I can put you right here. And maybe I'm going to see if maybe the stream will appear. And I can watch your chat on the screen while I'm filming with this. Hang on, one thing at a time here. Don't get too excited. Creator Studio. All right. You're like, that's amazing. All right, so we started. Now, I don't know what the sound is like. You have to tell me if it's decent, clean, too much garbage in the background. Live stream. I changed the title. That's got to mess with YouTube. But this is not a long-term solution. This can't be. So you have, oh yeah, the fan noise. I put you right on top of the Mac. Let's take you away from there. I want to try using my external mic like I always do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to plug this in, and then you guys are going to tell me if you still can hear me. So we'll do this. And now we have to see if you can hear me. And I know I keep covering the camera. Sorry about that. Let's try this first of all. I was really hoping we would see. Oh, okay, so things are happening over there on the screen. And I guess I can plug this thing back in since it doesn't matter. I think that stupid Just Broadcaster is still running. You can hear me. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I figured something would be better. That's why I always wear a mic. I always wear a mic. It's like my #1 rule. Okay, I gotta stop shaking the camera around. Give me a second here. I'm trying to get myself slightly organized. I was really hoping while I was doing this through the phone that it would show up on my YouTube channel for me. Turn this stupid thing off. Man, it's so aggravating. Turn that off. Is everything off? Can my fan cool down? Yeah. It even says that software just quit unexpectedly. I'm like, no, this thing's... Ignore. All right. I was really hoping the stream would show up here. I mean, we are streaming Emilov's Reef, right? I mean, I'm not on some other weird page. Not the Mac. Quit blaming my Mac. Yeah, see, that shows off. Let me try this. Let me go to my home page. See, I changed titles. I bet that's what's going on. Oh, that says live now. Let me click it. It says live now. Let me click it. Oh my God. I hear myself. Oh my God. All right, let's mute that so we don't do an endless loop of insanity. The fan will stop in a moment. I am going to grab a holder for this thing because I'm going to shake this thing around too much. You guys are going to hate it. All right, so we get to give Verizon some credit for giving me some decent upload speed, apparently. Ow. We'll take this thing, we'll take this, we'll put this right here. This is live, this is not Memorex. All right, what a beating. I don't really like this angle. I don't like it. Try not to drop you. We'll do this, put you there. Okay, well, this is different. I'm not really, I have no way to show pictures to you. I have no way to, all right, let's talk about flow. Before we had so much trouble getting connected, I was trying to get into this topic about why flow matters in a reef tank. And I apologize, you guys had to live through all that trying, for the last, for the last 45 minutes, an hour, whatever. When you're running a reef tank, you're wanting a certain amount of flow, and what matters is the livestock. So if you have a very simple system with mushrooms and pulsing zinnia and a leather coral, your flow probably isn't going to be nearly as critical as someone that has SPS corals. SPS corals are, by comparison, hard stony corals. They need a lot of flow, and some of them are frail and they're very thin. The branches are super thin. That means they can't handle much flow. And then there's others that are like big bony things, and they can handle a wave of water slamming into them over and over. So what we want to do is we want to figure out what's ideal for your tank, and we want to use quite a bit of flow without peeling the skin off the coral. If you use so much flow that the skin is ripping off and you're getting bald spots, that's obviously going to be problematic. Let me do something here. Turn this off. Okay, I think I did that right. When we set up a tank, we get all the different gear. We get power heads, or we get gyres, or we get vortex pumps. You might use a closed loop. These are all the things that you can use in a tank, but what we're trying to determine is how to change the flow in the tank. Basically, if you have water just flowing all the time one direction, it becomes laminar. And laminar flow isn't a bad thing, but it's kind of a boring thing. And what you might end up watching is, as corals are growing, they kind of grow and go one direction, and they all seem to face that way. And when you want to have a diverse looking reef, you're going to want the flow to be chaotic. And chaotic, well, by definition means, chaos is in the word. We're trying to create flow that's changing constantly. And so as this one power head is blowing toward this power head, the two waters intersect, and it creates that cavitating water that changes things up. One of the tricks that you could use with a power head is you can point the power head toward the front glass. Here's the front glass, and the power head is, well, let me do it this way so it faces you. So the power head is in the back of the tank, and it's blowing toward the front glass, and it ricochets off and goes the other way. That L shape, especially if you do it on two of them, you're creating a chaotic point. When you point the power heads at the surface, you want to see not just ripples, but you want to see the ripples all changing on the top. And that is pretty much my goal with my tank. I am never trying to have just constant steady flow. Some of the really nice pumps on the market these days, like I've been using a long time, the vortex pump, is that it changes into different speeds. There's tidal mode, there's lagoon mode, there is nutrient export mode. And these are all different ways of creating different flow rates in the tank, mathematically, basically. And one of my favorites when the vortex first came out was called reef crest. And if you could look at a graph, kind of like listening to sound effects, it would just like do little tiny squiggles and then big spurts, and then like small and then slow down and then shoot back up. I loved reef crest. Reef crest for me was the most diverse choice you could have in a tank. But then over time, the Ecotech line came out with 4 or 5 or 6 different modes. And you could actually say, I want lagoon mode early in the morning. I want reef crest for up to noon. Then I want it to go into nutrient export mode for like an hour, hour and a half. And then I want to switch it into just constant flow. And then you might say from 4 to 6, I want pulse mode, which would create that wave in your tank for a little while, and then switch back into reef crest, and then finally go back to lagoon mode. There's also night mode. I mean, there's all these different modes, and you could pick how long you want them to be and at what percentage you want them to be. And that's why I like running vortex pumps on my tank. The gyre, some of these other pumps that are on the market, the wave pump, these are all different ones that have settings you can select. There's also abilities to have certain pumps turn off during part of the day and other pumps turn on. So you have water coming from one side for a long time, and then it shuts off, let's say for 30 minutes, and now the water's coming from this side. That right there is a nice way to diversify the flow in the tank and avoid that constant one direction laminar flow that you may not like. One of the best ways to see the flow in your tank is to pour something in the tank that turns the water milky. For example, Purple Up is a good product you could pour in your tank. It's not going to do anything to your aquarium, to your livestock. It's not going to hurt them because it grows coralline. And as you pour it in, you'll see the white cloud, and you'll see the cloud how it moves. And you can see how far your return pump nozzle moves water across the tank. And if your tank is crazy long and it kind of goes, and then just kind of disperses into a fog, you don't have very much return pump power. If you have a huge cloud to shoot across, you have a lot. My tank uses the penductors. And a penductor is another way of creating flow in the tank. And another nickname for a penductor is eductor, and it's just because it's built a little differently in the shape. And of course, some people just call them flow accelerators. And the way it works is it's a plastic tube. Matter of fact, there's a company, I talked about it on my channel a few months ago. They 3D print these little flow accelerators on demand. So as you place an order today, they'll print it, and in 2 days it's on its way to you. And it'll just fit on the end of the lock line. So you've got that bumpy looking thing. One lady years ago called it this, and I always thought that was really cute. She called it the caterpillar nozzle. And Lockline lets you kind of point where you want the water to flow into your tank. And so you could say, I want it to go toward the front, or I don't want it to hit this coral, I want it to go around that coral. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility in how the water comes out. But at the same time, we want to create flow throughout the tank, and we don't want it to just die in a coral head. So a lot of times when you see demonstrations from companies showing you how their pumps work, they have a big glass aquarium that has nothing in it but water and one or two of their pumps, and they put on the demo, and they drop in little bits of plastic or things that look like confetti, that just blow around, and it just shows you this. But that only shows you water moving in an empty box that has no obstacles. And once you've aquascaped the tank and you've filled it up with all these different rocks, and then as the corals grow and become larger, they block the flow. And back in September, you guys saw me take out a whole bunch of huge colonies out of my tank, which actually improved the flow in my tank. And one of the things I wanted to show you today were all the pictures of the corals that I photographed. And I was trying to stream them and they would not work, and that stupid software would not work. So someone made the wonderful suggestion, point the camera at the screen. I'm sure it's going to look terrible, but we will try and see what the camera does. So we'll start off with this nice picture. And I will take this into my hands, and I will change the orientation of the camera, I believe. So we'll reverse that. So here are some blastos in my tank, and this picture was taken under 20K lighting with a flash. Then we'll grab another picture. This is my blue tort. And the blue tort, of course, this is a very vivid blue coral that I hit with a huge flash to actually see the skin of the coral, because I wanted to look and make sure the polyps are extended and healthy and look for any kind of red bugs. And I found none, which was awesome. Then we will open another one. See, this is a dumb way of showing things to you. This is a cactus pavona. And you can see the striations in the skin, and you see it grows in a cactus shape. It's kind of cool. And I actually have a huge colony. I just picked a couple of blades. Let me close these instead of opening all these windows. And we'll close this thing because that did nothing for us. And then this one here. I call this Drew's Acro because it came from a guy named Drew. And it's really pretty. It's very pink. Of course, this color, again, has a lot of blue and, the blue hue in it. And, because it was getting hit with a flash, so it kind of washed out a lot of the color. And here's another one of that coral. But you can see all the polyps are out, and it's very healthy. I love taking macro shots. All right, and we'll do this one. This is an elkhorn colony. This is actually a very brown acro. It's not a macro at all. It's a Montipora. And I liked seeing the actual polyps extending. So that's why I got a shot of the center of it. It grows in a very unique style. And then this was an acro that I got at the frag swap a few months ago, or 2 months ago at our I'm sorry, did I say frag swap? Fragging demo. at the club meeting. And so I took this picture of it today. It looks really good. And then I took a close-up picture of it. So you can kind of really see. And this is so cool to actually look at your acros and make sure they're healthy and happy. All right. What else we got here? This is a really nifty chalice. And back here in the background, this right here is Sunset Monopora. I've been talking about it. I might do it this weekend. I need to run a saw right through here and get that sunset away from this chalice, because this is actually a very nice chalice, and it's kind of expensive actually. So for me to let this coral just eat this one is a big mistake. And this one here is a very slow grower. It's got pink tips. The skin under normal lighting is greenish. Of course, I used a flash, so it blew out all the color so I could see the skin. So that green and pink color, this is apparently going to be an amazing coral when it has time. I've been growing it. I mean, that's a nub, and you can't even make it out, but this is one arm right down here at the bottom, right there. This right here, that's one arm of an Asterina. So this guy here, maybe the whole coral is like 3/4 of an inch tall. I mean, it's a nub. And then, what else did I get? This is a Milka coral, which is that big bright purple colony that I took a big piece out of my tank. And so you can see all the purple coloration here, and then you can see again, my goal was to show the entire coral. That's why I used a flash. I wanted to see what's going on. So you can see the polyps here. They're all kind of whitish because this side doesn't get the light like the metal halides hit up here. The underside again is white, but the part that gets the lighting from all day long is beautiful purple. And I'm going to put this over here maybe. There's another picture of the Milka. And this is a Millepora that's in my tank. It's in the Acropora family. It's called Acropora millepora. And the reason it's called Millie is because it has these longer tentacles that stick out like a single hair. So you got the polyp right here. And then there's like one long tendril that comes out. And that's what millies do. They have a big, every polyp has one long tentacle that comes out. And you can see a few popped up right here and there, right there, right there. Here's one right here. So that's new growth, that's new growth, this is new growth, this is new growth. There's quite a few pieces popping out. This has been a very boring stick that is taking its time to grow. Here's the entire thing. And you can see it's just starting to make babies along the bottom here finally. And then this one right here is looking really pretty. It's called a quad color instead of a tricolor. And then here is okay, this is funny. So this coral is completely red in my tank, 100% red. But when I hit it with a flash, this is the color. I mean, you get hints of pink, and that's about it. And then this right here is another scroll coral. The actual parent was put in a guy's tank over 20 years ago. And he gave me a piece, and it's actually, this thing is bigger than a potato chip. But I noticed that I could just make out the side. You can only see this thing when you look down from above. But here it is. I mean, here's some Valonia for a sense of scale. You got a couple bubbles there. And here are the polyps showing. And then there's some polyps right up here, too. Then the famous Shadowcaster, I wanted to see some of it. And it looks pretty healthy. The nice thing is I saw no pests on anything today. And then here is the Sunset Monty, which I always take pictures of. I just love it. And then this one here, I don't know what it's called. It's an unknown acro. And it's kind of brown with blue tips. It's not the most interesting coral in the world, but it's growing nicely, and it's got like a puddle around its foundation. And I'll show you a picture of it. A not so great picture of it that I took yesterday. Whoops, wrong folder. Hang on. And come back. I did this one. Here we go. So, okay, this picture is a lot more blue than I'd like for sharing on YouTube through an iPhone. But you can see how the tissue has grown out all around the rock. I'm going to try and hold this steady for a second so it's not so shaky. All right. So, let me see if I can get back to our window that we had. Oh, man, I got rid of it. What was I doing? Let me switch this for a second, and I'll show chat again for a minute. So I hope that you enjoyed some of those pictures. And I'm going to get this rearranged again really quick and get us back to YouTube because I closed the window. How did I do that? All right. So that is some stuff that grew in my tank because of chaotic flow. And chaotic flow is what's so important. If you can create randomized flow in your tank, your reef is very likely going to be more successful. I wanted to also mention a product called a Sea Swirl. I talked about it in Joe's tank, the one that's 20,000 gallons. And his tank was the whole front, it's 2 big windows. And on the, so here's a window, and there's a Sea Swirl, a Sea Swirl, a Sea Swirl, a Sea Swirl. And then the next window has 1, 2, 3, 4 more. And those, there's a motor that actually pivots the nozzle back and forth. And you can pick, I want it to move 90 degrees, I want it to move 180 degrees. And it'll just gradually do it all the time. So it's really nice to be able to see how your corals will respond to these changes in flow. And that's why we just try to avoid just putting in a MaxiJet, for example, and just turning it on. And a MaxiJet is steady flow, 295 gallons an hour, and that's all it does for forever until you unplug it. But if you can use something that's a wave maker that dials down the flow and cranks up the flow and varies the flow, that'd be nice. And it's a nice, it's the best results you'll get will be that way. Now, one of you asked me to show you the tank, and the tank is completely in blue mode because it is already 940 over here. And as we know, the iPhone hates pure blue. It's going to be kind of pointless to point it that direction. I mean, I can hold at the camera, but you're not going to see a lot. See, it's blue. That's pretty much what you get this time of night. That's why I take pictures when it's in 10K mode, because I want to be able to see everything inside the tank. Now, okay, great. I want to say, feel free to ask questions now. I'll be happy to answer them. And the first question that was asked was, what about day versus night flow? If you have the ability to change the flow, to slow it down at night, you can. But there's certain things you should never do. Like, for example, I was talking to a friend who's been trying to maintain a beautiful reef now for several years. And for a long time, his corals just were not happy. They'd have a few, I don't know, moments of happiness, and they would decline. They would shut down and everything. And we determined that he had used his return pump, which is the Vectra, I think the L1, and it allows you to control the speed. And he was only having the Vectra at a decent flow rate, where it was really moving water into the tank for about, I think it was something like 8 hours a day. And then for about 12 or 13 hours a day, he had it down at 35%, where barely any water came into the tank at all. So what was happening is the tank was getting really cold because the water was barely coming up from the sump where the heater was. And so that warmed water that was perfect never made it into the display tank. And so the reason we figured this out is I was looking at his Apex graphs. And in the controller, it showed the temperature would drop and drop and drop and drop and drop and drop and drop, over a period of, those 12 hours. And then it would get warmer, 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 be warm for a little while, and then start cooling off. And I was like, how is your tank cooling off for 2/3 of a day? And that's when we found out that he was changing the speed of the return pump. And so I asked him, why do you do that? And he didn't even have a really good reason. He was like, I don't know. So I told him, can you just turn your return pump to a normal speed and keep it running at that rate nonstop from now on for the rest of your life? And so he did. And all of a sudden the corals were growing and doing better. Imagine that. Stable water produces good results. That's what we want. I'd like to recommend that you always make sure your return pump is stable and running. I wouldn't change the speed on that. If you want to slow down the speed on your display pumps, your in-tank flow, you can. It's not necessarily necessary. Like I said, I have set mine up just because of the ability of programming that I can tell it, slow it down a little bit. But if my tank is running at, let's say, 83%, then I might bring it down to 72% at night or something and then ramp it back up again or have it bounce around in that area. I want to keep oxygen in my tank. And when you slow down flow in the display, you actually affect the oxygen levels. And while your fish are resting, so they're not needing as much oxygen, it's still really important to have enough in there to keep them so they don't break out in some kind of disease because of being stressed. Now, someone said, I've been thinking about flow through the sump. And he asked, why not get as much flow as possible out of the return nozzle? And Chris, that actually is what people did 15 years ago. They would get the biggest pump they can get their hands on to shoot all that water in the display tank and have no pumps to look at. They said, oh, this is so much better. But they were running into all kinds of problems. And the number one problem is microbubbles. Because when you move water through the sump so quickly, even through compartments and through baffles, what happens is your water is draining into the sump full of bubbles, and then it ricochets through all the compartments to the return pump and sends up all these bubbles, and your display tank is filled with bubbles. And honestly, there's very little upside to high flow through a sump. You can do it, but what ends up happening is, number one, microbubbles could be a thing. And of course, you can put sponges in there and filter socks to try and catch the bubbles. You can do all kinds of stuff to try to reduce those. But the other problem is you're moving water so quickly through the sump, you're moving it quickly through the filtration. And the job of the filtration, such as the protein skimmer, is to remove organics. And if it's just slingshotting past it, the same detritus that came down the drain will just keep traveling and land somewhere else in the sump, or actually pump right back in the display tank and land on the rockwork. So I always recommend keeping your flow through the sump slow, more like 5 times the size of the display tank. So if you have a 100-gallon tank, you're only needing something like 500 gallons an hour going through the sump. And if you have a 200-gallon tank, then you're looking at maybe 1,000 gallons an hour. And I know a lot of people use pumps that are faster than that. They just do. So I would recommend that you keep it slower if possible. And then use the high speed, like Robert is saying here, have high speed wave makers, have high speed in-tank flow. You've got the wave pump, you've got, we have to ban someone again. Jeez, why? Well, that was quick. We just want to have plenty of flow in the display tank where it's needed. There's no benefit to having high flow inside your sump area. There's no benefit. Let's see. I can look it up. Let me take a look. I'll see what kind of flow rates are going on here. Assuming I know my password. All right, give me a second here. All right, logging in. Now, we're going to look at Vortex. And I'll show you guys this too. So let's switch the screen here. So here is the flow rate of the clownfish tank, the anemone cube. And if you'll look, you'll see that right here, from midnight to 8 a.m., the Vortex is running around 38%. And then from 8 a.m. all the way through 12:30 or 1 o'clock, it's running at 61% in reef crest. Then I do tidal swell up to 70%. Then I go back down to lagoon mode at 56%, and then back to around 10 p.m. it slows way down. And I don't need to have a lot of flow at that point. All right. Now that we've removed that person, we'll jump to a different tank. How about the 400-gallon? That's the big one, the reef, the Vortex here. And you can see I have different pumps for different areas. This is the MP40, which is for the bommy, which would be over the hammer corals. And then over on the left end of the tank is my MP60 and MP60. And I've got these running around 35 to 40% during the night. Then I crank it up to 50, and then tidal's full at 65. Lagoon mode back at 60. So I'm never really running my pump really fast. I don't max it out. And this works out well for me. All right. I don't know why people want to come on a live stream and talk about junk. Makes no sense. Let's talk about fish. Let's talk about reefs.